Well, last week was both the PCA General Assembly as well as the Southern Baptists Annual Convention. And both events mark important bellwethers for where their respective denominations are going to be headed in the new year. In this episode, we're going to discuss my experience at the 51st Annual PCA General Assembly and review the biggest topics that the SBC's convention went over as well. That's all coming up tonight on Civically Minded. I feel like I'm a couple days behind on everything since getting home from the 51st annual PCA General Assembly, but I have to say it was worth the time away and the sense of playing catch up when I got back to be part of the festivities that were taking place in Richmond, Virginia just this year. This was only my second General Assembly, and last year, being our 50th anniversary celebration, well, it was going to be hard to top. And while this year was not filled with the special guest or the pageantry that we enjoyed last year in Memphis, this year did give me the opportunity to make some new friends, to feel a little more comfortable with the overall General Assembly vibe, and to take part in some events that I was unaware of last year. Now, while last year's assembly was indeed special, and it was full of both looking back on our past and some excited speculating about our future, there were several hotly contested overtures and topics debated from the floor of the assembly last year. So I have to say, this year was less contentious overall, though there were some polarized moments and some close votes to be sure. And I have to say, to everyone's amazement, we adjourned even earlier this year than we did last year under Fred Greco. I'm not certain that this is any kind of proof that we're becoming more efficient as an assembly, or that maybe there was just fewer hot topics to slow us down. But to quote now infamous teaching elder Zach Bird, like cornstarch in the graveyard, the plot is going to thicken. So, why does any of this matter? Well, the Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant evangelical denomination in America. They also control the five largest seminaries as well. So many pastors, missionaries, elders, and lay leaders are ultimately trained at a Southern Baptist seminary. And the PCA, or the Presbyterian Church in America, is the largest Reformed evangelical denomination in America. And we have Covenant College and Seminary, as well as the Reformed Theological Seminary umbrella that is either officially or loosely affiliated with us. And so, again, as a denomination, it too acts as an important standard bearer. So, let me give you a rundown of what my week looked like there in Richmond. I started out Monday morning, sadly, in an unplanned and an emergency dental appointment to reset a crown that had come out on me over the weekend. Wasn't that big of a deal, but it delayed my departure from Charlotte by almost 2 hours, and it set me back enough that I missed my committee meeting with Covenant Seminary, in which I was supposed to be a commissioner. Now, this is frowned on, and you're not supposed to miss them, but there wasn't a whole lot I could do given the circumstances. So, this was not the best start to my week. But I got checked into the hotel and registered at the assembly, and I felt much more relaxed knowing that I was now settled in for the duration. Now, it's here that I'm going to have to give a quick shout out to teaching elder Nate Zanders. He's a teaching elder in Knoxville, Tennessee area, and we met on X. He invited me to a little get together the first night with other PCA postmillennial brothers for pizza and drinks. Had a wonderful time meeting some new friends and just talking to like minded brothers. Tuesday morning saw us back over at the assembly hall bright and early, and I had the opportunity to meet teaching elder and YouTube channel host Matthew Everhard. He actually is the man who, through his teaching, helped my wife come to a understanding of paedobaptism. It was his teaching and preaching on that topic that made her go, "Ah, now I get it." So I was very eager to shake his hand and tell him thank you. I also had a brief interaction with pastor and author of It's Good to Be a Man, Michael Foster, and he gave me some encouraging words about my looming licensure and ordination. I also got to see some men from my own presbytery that I serve with here in North Carolina, guys that I don't get to see as often as I would like. Tuesday evening was our first worship service, and moderator from last year, Fred Greco, preached a wonderful sermon on the sufficiency of Scripture. Our assembly business began in earnest after that initial time of worship, and we would spend the rest of the evening, almost till 10 o'clock, on some business. After we broke for the night, several TEs and ruling elders from the Carolinas met for drinks to discuss the formation of what we're going to call the Carolina Collective, a group of men with the common goal of seeing the PCA and its churches planted in much needed areas within North and South Carolina. Wednesday morning started bright and early again at 8 a.m. with the reconvening of the assembly. Our stated clerk, Dr. Brian Chappell, would give us the rundown of the denomination since last year's meeting, and I have to say it was all good news. I was excited when he said that giving was so robust and that we had baptized over 500 covenant children this year and over 500 new converts as well, and that we are looking to open 1,000 new PCA churches in the next 10 years. Now, that's astonishing given that most denominations are shrinking, some are closing altogether. So I thank God for our growth and the continued blessing upon the PCA. I have to say, as just broad statements, we would decide this year that we are a denomination decidedly committed to male ordination with any church office, be that deacon, ruling elder, or teaching elder. They have to be male. We also firmed up our language on sexual purity and sexual identification of officers, again, somewhat in light of the revoice and side B movements that had plagued us just a few years ago. We also came to the conclusion that we need to investigate the Jesus Calling book franchise. We had been made aware of its 45 million copies that have been sold and the teaching that is being read and digested by many of our members. So the assembly felt that it was incumbent upon us to make sure of its potential danger, or not. Now, this is merely a commission meant to ascertain the doctrine and theology of this book and to report back to the assembly next year. The most hotly debated topic of the year, however, was a reoccurring issue from last year, and it's actually one that we have voted on both in committee and in an assembly before. Now, this topic is the allowance of atheists to testify before our ecclesiastical courts. This was the fifth time that it was voted down, whether in committee or assembly. Now, it was a close vote to be sure, but the majority once again voted that we will not allow atheists to have any place in our church courts. I think there was a lot of wonderful back and forth on the floor, both for and against the measure. I respect my brothers that voted opposite of me, and I even can see where their compassion would lead them to do so. I applaud them for trying to be good pastors and churchmen. But I will openly say I voted in the majority favor. Wednesday night saw over 1,000 of us after worship attend the Gospel Reformation Network's annual banquet and hear Dr. Rosaria Butterfield give an impassioned speech about the sin of homosexuality, transgenderism, and the idea of concupiscence. She was compelling, I have to say, and she pulled zero punches, even with the hosting body being the PCA. She reminded us that now that Greg Johnson has left our midst, that we failed, that we let him leave intact and not defrocked by our highest courts, and that this was a mistake, and that revoice and side B heresy is still present within the PCA, and that we must be diligent to eradicate it from our midst. Next, I attended a great after party at what was called the Commonwealth Club in Richmond. Again, it was a wonderful time of just brothers getting together over drinks, cigars, and maybe a pipe smoke and discussing where God had taken us, where we think He is taking us from here, and just being able to commiserate as brethren. Again, I have to give a shout out to my friend George Sayer for making me aware of these opportunities and granting me the invitation to be part of them. Thursday saw the end of the assembly business in earnest and near record time. And after that, an amazing bilingual service brought to us by our brothers in the Korean Capital Presbytery. I want to thank them for exposing us to something larger than what we normally get to see. It was a beautiful reminder of the global reach of God's kingdom. I also want to thank the host city and the host presbyteries for such a beautiful and successful General Assembly. I can't wait to do it again next June in Chattanooga. Now, Tuesday and Wednesday also saw the Southern Baptists meeting in Indianapolis. Now, many of my more conservative and fundamental Baptist brethren left less encouraged with their meetings than I left ours. Now, remember, my actual blood brothers, my older and younger brothers, are both Southern Baptists. My older brother is a ordained Southern Baptist pastor, and my younger brother is an ordained Southern Baptist deacon. My mother is at a Southern Baptist church, and I have many friends that are still in that denomination. So I feel a big draw to what's going on there. And like I said earlier, They're huge. So, as goes the Southern Baptist, so in some way goes American Christendom. Now, the largest item on their docket was the seemingly ever present battle between the hard complementarians and the blatantly egalitarian members within the denomination. So, the introduction of the Law Amendment by the Center for Baptist Leadership and quite a few members of Founders Ministries sadly could not collect the two-thirds required vote to pass. It got 61%, so certainly a majority, but it needed two-thirds. So I fear that the fight will rage on. Amendment 990, as they called it, an amendment seeking financial transparency within the denomination's larger agencies like the ERLC and NAMB, was also shot down. As a guy with a business background, I can't fathom why you would want to shoot down financial transparency. Well, I can, but none of it's good. A suggestion from the floor to outlaw all expressions of Calvinism or Reformed doctrine in SBC churches, thank God, was also shot down. But what also lost was a motion to add the Nicene Creed to the Baptist Faith and Message, the governing documents of the Southern Baptist Convention. They also shot that down. But I have to say, not all hope is lost for the SBC. A mere 4 or 5 years ago, the PCA was leaning increasingly leftward ourselves, and Side B and Revoice movements were gaining ground. And now, for the third year in a row, we in the PCA have pushed back hard. The ruling elders became more involved, and many of the younger and more openly conservative teaching elders also started finding their voices. So it can turn quickly, but men must show up and show a willingness to be inconveniently stubborn and willing to fight against the mission drift and the persistently left leaning Overton window. So pray for such men, both that God would provide them and that when he does, that they're not easily cowed even by a majority. If we're ever to wrestle this nation back to God, it must start in the pulpits. And the pastors, of course, will then help it bleed over into the homes. But this will require strong conservative seminaries, strong Bible preaching churches, and strong, resolute pastors. And of course, denominations willing to be the vanguard of a restorative and biblical reformation. So may God give us men to lead such denominations. For Civically Minded, I'm Corey Wing. Until next time.